But now we are having a talk that I'm moderating, and I'm super excited to be part of this morning. We're going to be talking about the challenges and growth opportunities for European fashion tech companies. And I'd like to call to the main stage Archibald Charlet, who oversees the startup programs for LVMH, Eric Bang, who is the innovation lead for H&M Foundation, Frederick Timour, who is the Director of Fashion Innovation at Swedish Fashion Council, and founders of Studio Hilo, Natalia Karasapanova, I don't know if I've said that right, I hope I have, Natalia, and Sarah Diaz. Welcome, guys. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi.
We've got everybody on here. So we're going to talk a lot today about the challenges and growth opportunities for fashion tech companies, which is something that I feel like you guys know a lot about. So, let's get in it. I want to first ask you guys a question, just a general question to kind of get the conversation started. As the fashion tech space progresses, what improvements do you think still need to be made in order to speed up adoption? Maybe we can start with you, Eric.
Yeah, sure. Hi, Muchaneta. Great to be on the panel. Very excited for the day and great conversation just ahead of us. Well, I think that's a really big question, and I think it's twofold. Both the dynamics and the identity of this industry is it doesn't have the heritage of innovation and R&D and disruption in that sense that many other industries do have. So I think this conversation and this transformation is sort of trying to push a new type of behavior with both brands and supply chain on how to relate and engage and interact and scale innovation in the first place. I mean, we're spending and allocating majority of budgets on product development and marketing rather than pure R&D and innovation. And I think secondly also, we are an industry of merchants, and we buy in one place and sell in another place. That's not really innovation, and innovation is not part of the identity of the industry in that sense. So that's sort of the structure of what this industry is like, and why some of these changes are taking maybe longer than we would have liked them to take. And also, I think that's where the opportunity for this lies, is sort of who can transform their internal behavior faster than the competitors, and thereby ride and absorb these opportunities faster.
What do you think, Frederick? I know you and I have had conversations about scaling fashion tech brands, and we've talked way into the night with cups of coffees and really going deep into it. I would love for you to share your thoughts, because you do have some interesting points that you've made in the past.
Yeah, I think Eric is completely right. I mean, one of the main problems is the lack of R&D and innovation, but also I think collaboration is quite important. And we're talking about an industry, just like Eric said, that never really looked into. They haven't built any IP internally because they haven't done any R&D. But there are companies out there, and there are industries out there that are really good at looking into users, monthly recurring revenues, new business models, etc. And collaboration between these businesses, I think, will be the key for acceleration. And what I'm talking about is, for example, music industry, the entertainment industry, and of course the gaming industry. And we can already see things happening in those areas. But I firmly believe in this collaboration will be a driver forward for the business.
I've kind of noticed that a lot of fashion businesses are quite shy when it comes to experimenting with new technologies. And I do feel like this is why, we are kind of very late at adopting new innovations. Natalia and Sarah, you are a startup. I mean, how have you found the fashion industry in terms of grabbing all new innovation? Have you found them to be lacking, or have you found them to be quite interested and much more better than they were, let's say, 5 years ago?
I would say that our experience is, well, we are a textile startup, so we work mostly with, we offer open source machines to create yarn, so to create the basic material of any textile construction or textiles, which is the basic material for fashion. So we are kind of like in the supply chain field. And I agree with Timour. We experience that there is a need for innovation, but there is no connection between the different steps in production chain in the fashion industry. And this is a huge problem because there is a lot of money and budget put it in the marketing strategies and the relationship between customer and the product. But in the backstage, so in the production chain, there is a huge need for this innovation and actually to cooperate more and exchange more information and kind of like a work together in order to implement innovation and also improve production processes, because nowadays, as you all know, it's a big shame and it's not working well because basically everything works based on overproduction.
What do you think, Natalia? What are your thoughts?
I mean, coming also from a background before we started ELO or Studio ELO, working as an innovation consultant, I mean, there's always this huge issue when it comes to innovation on budget, right? You risk into something, you put in money and you're not sure what comes out. So there needs to be a freedom for innovation, but you also want to have a certain outcome, which is not always guaranteed on the one hand. And then also looking back at our history, also we established our studio in 2018. It just takes a while for people to understand true innovation. I mean, we're working in the context of open knowledge, of open source manufacturing tools. We're working in a field which is at least for Germany, where we are based, but we're working also in a field that is very much working in silos, not just for the manufacturing part. We produce this here, idea like comes from Europe, is produced in Asia, and so forth, but also in terms of how the industry, the textile industry, has evolved to this industry is very much isolated, and so. I mean, it takes a while until they open up for this idea of open source and open knowledge and sharing and coming together and experimenting, not knowing what the outcome might be. And I feel that it took us like about 2 years until people opened up on the idea of establishing also open source. We're lucky that there are movements like the Fab Labs, or I mean, generally the whole 3D printer idea, who revolutionized for us this kind of like thinking. But along with this new mindset that we are creating with open knowledge and open source machinery, there needs to be also a new adaptation into business models. And I think this is what people are struggling with. They're not sure how to implement it, like how to be open, but still like make money and keep it for themselves. So I think this is kind of a crucial part where they are still in progress of understanding, I guess. And that is something that is also working into this question that you had on how this innovation takes place right now from our perspective, I guess.
I think you said two really interesting points. The first one is knowledge sharing, and the second point that you made was business models. So I think these are two areas that the fashion industry is really finding hard to get its head around. But I remember, Eric, you and I were on a panel together, and you said something that was super interesting that still stuck in my head 2 years later, was that H&M Foundation is coming up with solutions for the entire industry, not just for H&M.
Right.
So, you know, grasping this need to share knowledge and collaborate and push the merger of fashion technology forward, would you say that this is something that the fashion industry is able to acknowledge and open up to? Or would you say that you have found that people are kind of still a little hesitant to believe that H&M Foundation is open to sharing it's what it finds and its knowledge and its technology and so forth?
Yeah, that's a great question from our perspective. I mean, we are a separate nonprofit entity, so our mission is to push this transformation for the entire industry, not for the sole benefit of the H&M group. But of course, I mean, yes, we still meet sort of some hesitation as to our name and our affiliation or connection with the group, and if we're doing it on their behalf or on truly on the industry's behalf. And but that's fine. I think we haven't got nothing to hide, and I think our track record in terms of where our solutions and ventures that we've supported and are adopted, and also the own research that we drive, that we do share it open source, is a really strong support for that claim. But in general, I find this industry quite open to collaboration. There is a lot of curiosity and willingness to learn and engage. And then, of course, then you take those insights and you sort of morph them into your own interpretation and expression with your own brand. So, and that's where you have, in my position, the really fascinating position of being able to leverage the fear of missing out between different brands. So if you're not interested, I have a bunch of others that do want to do this. And then it becomes a race to be first instead. So I think there's great opportunity from this tool, as mentioned, of open source and collaboration, to also speed this up, and not just being sort of a nice thing that looks good on paper, but it truly adds to the speed of scaling and adoption.
See, I think that people do want to collaborate. I mean, you have to look at Stella McCartney and Bold Threads, but I feel like there's a lack of commitment. Collaboration is not the problem. The committing to this marathon that it is, rather than, you know, something that's quick and short and they've done with it. So, you know, I kind of hope that the fashion industry learns not just to get excited about technology in that moment, but to also commit to it, and to realize that, like other industries, like the sports industries, they commit to something and they come up with, you know, they've got a plan and they have like a goal. So, but I do believe that a lot of that is to do with the business models, which I know you, Frederick, have spoken quite a lot about the new fashion business models. I think it's great if you could share with us your thoughts on how the fashion industry can adopt new business models and why they should as well.
Yeah, I mean, what we have been looking at quite a lot is revenue streams, basically, and how we can drive sustainability with growth. Because, I mean, one of the main problems is the sheer volume of clothes that we produce today. But it's quite hard to go to the fashion industry and tell them to stop producing as much clothes. So what we've been looking at is the alternative to that, is there other ways to make money. And when you start looking into that, I mean, you come up with, for example, a subscription model of clothes makes sense, both from a business model perspective. It's more scalable, etc., but also from a consumer behavior. Because if you look at it, the whole business is in a position where it's quite ready for disruption. Another player could walk in, I mean, Netflix, whatever, and become a fashion player. It's doable. It's in the same position as the music industry was years ago, where consumers or people or the users are asking for something else, but they're not given something else. And the consumer don't know what they want, but they just know that they want something else. And when someone comes with a subscription service for music, for example, it was a small startup, Spotify, people adopted to a new business model. So I think that from that perspective, it's quite important that the fashion industry try out new business models as quickly as possible to get competitive, and do understand that there are other players out there from completely different industries who are interested entering the market as well. So that's my perspective.
And I just want to, I mean, I kind of like you say Netflix. I think that, you know, this is something that the fashion industry has missed, like this kind of service model. So hopefully, you know, we'll see a Netflix of fashion. But I want to pick your brain, Archibald. You haven't said anything quite yet. I wanted to ask you, when it comes to new technology being the enabler and supporting early stage innovations, would you agree that to help bring tech solutions to market, we need to be able to give them a lot more support to startups? Because I feel like they do get support, but I also feel like they get support for only a short period of time. Then after that, they're on their own. You know, how can we make it so that they are for the long run, rather than they're in it and then they disappear?
I think it's there's multiple ways to do it. The first one and the easiest one, I think, is how do we help these startups and these solutions provide solutions that can be integrated into existing business models, and how do we help them build those use cases in order for it to be relevant for our industries. And I think in the past, when we look at what's been done in, I don't know, the last 5 to 10 years, we've had a lot of technological trends and a lot of hype around those trends that have been coming up specifically in the industry, if we take experiences, we had virtual reality, augmented reality, all those technologies that had a lot of hype, but to actually find the use case that could be relevant to brands and to the industry in general took a while. And I think we're getting there for those technologies, for example, but for a lot of technologies, we're not there yet. So how do we help them define the use cases that could be relevant to brands and to companies in general to be able to generate revenue is where we're going to make those companies become more sustainable on the long term. I don't know if it's making any sense for you, but that's my 2 cents on it.
And how do you pick the companies? I mean, what's kind of your strategy? Do you kind of think, okay, fashion brands are looking for sustainability, so we're going to pick more brands that, startups that are kind of focusing on that? Or, I mean, what's your selection process?
Well, we are a support group within the LVMH group. We're a support team. Our role is really to identify the business needs of our companies within the LVMH group and to match it with existing startups. So the way we select it is purely to be able to answer those business needs. So we have some prospective subjects and some startups that don't already answer to one of those needs, but most of the time it's solutions that can be applicable to our industry and that already have MVPs. So we have 2 programs. We have one innovation award. So it's an innovation award, quite simple. The idea is really to be able to improve the customer experience, both in the back end and in the consumer facing part. But the other program we have is LVMH La Maison des Startups, and this one is really an accelerator. So we have 25 startups, and our role is, again, to drive business growth for both entities, the Maison of the LVMH group, but also the startups we pick. So we pitch so that they're able to collaborate together and create synergies and create great projects that make sense on the long term.
Okay, I mean, I quite like what you guys are doing, and I feel like when a big company such as yourself is able to push forward startups that are doing amazing things, it kind of helps the rest of the industry to follow suit. So it's always good to see like LVMH and H&M really kind of trying to push forward innovation, because I do feel like people are always a bit hesitant until the big boys come and play, and then they're more likely to want to be part of it. But I read recently that the fashion tech space has become a significant part of the creative economy, with the potential to contribute to the growth of Europe's fashion industry. I mean, would you agree with this statement, and why? To everyone, whoever wants to go first.
If I just may say one thing first, I think obviously because of the current situation, it was already in process of being a bigger part of the economy, but I think it's increasing. And the past year, if it has had one good impact, this one is actually increase the adoption of new services, of new technologies for the industry in general, and specifically on the creative part as well. And I think that's really good for startups and fashion tech startups in specific.
And anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, I definitely think so as well. And I think it's, I mean, when this really starts, it's also a very good way of funneling a lot of technologies and innovation into new types of products, because there's a lot of innovations in Europe. And Europe in general have a problem. I mean, we're really good at innovation, but not as good at commercialization of that innovation. And that's really where I think the fashion industry could be an accelerator of a lot of innovation as well, going forward, which is also very good for Europe.
Yeah, I agree too. And I think that these types of, so maybe trends or transformations, they happen very slowly. And then all of a sudden it takes off like the hockey curve stick, and it goes really, really fast. And I think we're just at that juncture where there's no longer a lack of ideas and innovation and solutions to adopt and try and test and pilot and scale. But really where I think you pointed to this earlier, Muchaneta, with your question, that now it's a matter of the capability of the industry to adopt and really absorb these opportunities. And as that starts to happen, then we're going to see a really rapid expansion of this space within Europe and globally in the industry as well.
But when you kind of look to China, which is kind of considered to offer incredible and exciting growth opportunities for the fashion industry when it comes to innovation, how can we get Europe to that level? You know, I feel like when you look at China and you look at the consumer there, They are so used to using technology, and they even expect innovation to be part of their shopping experience. How can we make it so we are kind of on par with China and we're on kind of the same level? Is this possible at all? Or do you think the demands in China are different from the ones in Europe? So therefore, we can't expect to be on that same level.
Should I go first, or?
Yes, anyone, whoever wants to take that baton first, please go ahead.
No, yeah, I think we're going to see regional differences in consumer behavior and consumer demand for types of solutions and products. So I don't think we should strive for like one flat offer across the world. And yes, I mean, Chinese consumer, they have the advantage of going tech first, as you say, because they have such a fast growth and access to these new products and markets. We have to change our behavior, and they just start from a clean slate in a sense. And so the dynamics will play out a little bit differently. But these things also tend to go back and forth in waves. And so I'm sure this conversation that we're having right now, and the Green New Deal within Europe, and all the money spent on or allocated from governments, the EU, the European Investment Bank, etc., on the green transformation will trickle down to, I think, a huge acceleration of this trend in Europe.
Completely, I completely agree with you, Eric. And just to add on that, I think consumer behaviors are really different in China than they are in Europe, and they even are in the USA, for example, or North America in general. So I think trying to reproduce what's been done there is, for Europe, for example, not really relevant, because it wouldn't have the same impact. And there's a huge difference as well, is the digital ecosystem in Asia and in China, to add on what Eric said, is centralized in a lot of manners. So if you look at WeChat, for example, the way and the kind of experiences you can provide with WeChat are unique to China. And even if you wanted to reproduce them in Europe or in North America, or for the rest of the world, for that matter, it would provide different experiences. Not to say that they wouldn't be relevant, but they would be different. And I think that's what we need to strive for, is more and more the industry is not globalized, but we have big markets that emerge and that have really strong specificities that we need to address.
And another thing I think that we have as let's call it a competitive advantage, is that we have a very strong creative and aesthetic background in Europe. And when you combine that with the technology, because in the end, there is a consumer offer that needs to be created. And I assume it will be content-based. I mean, you will have to add this content layer on top of it, and that's where the technology comes in as well. And I think that we are very good at that in Europe in general, on the fashion business in general, creating that content and that putting it at a certain level, let's put it that way. So that, I think, is a competitive advantage, at least.
Yeah,
and that goes back to, sorry, I just wanted to, that goes back to the first question about innovation. That's where we got our innovation from. In the industry, creatives were the one who were driving innovation for a big part. And I think that's why creativity is one of our stronger points.
Yeah, and I would like to add on the point, because I mean, we are, as you already heard, we are a startup working a lot into social impact. And I think one big thing that arose also last year was the awareness for sustainability. And I think also the attitude when we look at customers in Europe, and I can speak for Germany, there's a lot of new values coming up that are not covered by industry yet, and they are completely differently also in terms of how much do I buy, like do I buy secondhand or not, do I buy at a store, do I order it, etc., etc. So all this in the end behaviors are here based on a totally different value set than in China, as I observe in Germany rather less consume of products compared to, I mean, also consumers and industry in a country that is rising right now. And I think this is also something to be considered when we talk about the differences, because we certainly do have another value set here within our customers in terms of purchase, in terms also of clothing, etc.
I mean, talking about differences, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. Most of you are very familiar with the big four, you know, in London, New York, Paris, and Milan, being like everywhere Fashion Week takes place, and the struggles and the challenges they've had to kind of keep the interest of the consumer and everyone within the fashion business kind of coming to Fashion Week, and whether it's relevant and so forth. Can you see that changing, and the big four maybe changing to being Sweden, Germany, you know, Netherlands, because these are countries that are getting really well known for innovation and pushing forward different ways of doing fashion. And when it comes to London, Paris, Milan, and New York, less so, I find, you know, in my experience, I find a lot of innovation is coming, like the core, like the really kind of, you know, part of innovation is more from the countries like Sweden, like Netherlands, you know, like Germany. Can you see that changing? And suddenly the big four is no longer the big four we all know, but it's actually countries that have actually really pushed innovation and supported it.
Do you mean big four as in Fashion Weeks?
Yes, exactly. Yes, so it's completely changes how we name it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because in that case, my firm belief is that Fashion Weeks will not be relevant in the future. Not as we see it today. I mean, especially if we go into digitalization, if we're talking about what I said about digital layers and content and users and completely different business models, then I don't know if Fashion Weeks, because I mean, if you look at it, Fashion Weeks is kind of an aging idea of how to sell. No other businesses are selling in that. It has this kind of 60s standing with a drink kind of feeling about it. And it's 2021.
I agree with you on that, but I do think it's because Fashion Week hasn't evolved. Wouldn't you say it's at a standstill? Maybe if it evolves and it changes and it turns to innovation, we can present our collections in a different manner.
I think it's evolving. When we look at what's been done for the past year, for example, in terms of Fashion Week, on the way to present collections by brands and so on, I think even if it's only the beginning, and I completely join Frederick's point of view on that, I think to me, it's not going to be irrelevant because it's always going to be a way to showcase the collection. I think there is always going to be a timing to do that, just for business standpoint, for example, to be able to order your collection and so on. And because we have seasons and we want to dress accordingly to the seasons. So I think those meetings are still going to be there, but we're going to multiply the way that we present our collections. And I think when we look at what's been done in the past year, we've never seen as much virtualization of collections, of new ways to actually be able to present it to the general public, new interactive gaming solutions that actually provide new experiences and so on. And I think we're not there yet. We still have work to do, and clearly it's still in experimentation phase. But I think we're seeing more and more traction, and last year has clearly been an accelerator for me on that regard. So I think it's a really good sign that it's evolving.
And Sarah and Natalia, as startups, I mean, are you drawn to Fashion Week? Is it something that you look at, refer to?
Well, we are more in the field of textile industry. So, of course, fashion is a part of our actually customer target group, kind of. But textiles are really broad, so it's...
But are you inspired by Fashion
we also
Week?
work in the interior architecture and so on. But actually, I agree with, I think, Archibald.
Has she frozen for everybody else?
Yes.
Okay. Would you like to speak, Natalia, maybe?
Sure. I'm not sure what her point might have been, but as she said, we're mostly focusing on textiles, and I think where we look at is exactly what you said. We look to Sweden, we look to Belgium, we look to the Netherlands, because this is where we observe in terms of textile manufacturing, not fashion, really great new approaches coming up as local manufacturing, as recycling. You have great universities, and this is also where we look at London, for instance. You have great universities with really creative and value-driven new designers coming up. And this is where we go if we're looking for partnerships, and if we're looking for inspiration for ourselves as well, and collaborations. So I would go along with your with your thesis of shifting cities and players or game changer player cities somehow in the world. And yeah, I think looking at fashion weeks, it's more private pleasure than relevant for our work.
I mean, I've been in the fashion industry for about 15 years. So I used to look to Fashion Week to get inspired, to get excited, to see what's new, what colors am I wearing, you know, and it used to be really exciting for me. But I do feel like, you know, the generation today of fashion designers, they're looking less at Fashion Week and looking at innovation and looking at the startups that are coming up with the new type of materials, or, you know, or the startups that are coming up with new ways to sell your product or new ways to be more sustainable. So it feels like Fashion Week has lost its oomph for this next generation, would you say, or would you completely disagree with what I just said?
I think it's going to be hard to compete with the gravitas of Paris, London, New York, and Milan in a sense, because it's still the epicenters of fashion and expression and trends in that sense. But I don't think that's necessarily going to be an obstacle for disruption of the industry. I mean, look at Spotify. Frederick mentioned, I mean, they're founded in Stockholm, but listed in New York Stock Exchange, not listed in Sweden, because that's the gravitas for fundraising and for tech. And same with Farfetch, founded in Lisbon, but moving to London, listed in New York. So I think we're going to it's much more fluid environment where disruption is happening probably from the unexpected places. And the disruption is not going to happen from within, you know, London, Paris, New York, and Milan, but from someplace else. But it's still going to be drawn back to Paris and be implemented in Paris, because that's where Archibald sits, right? And so I think it's going to be a much more fluid and dynamic environment where these, I hope my point got across.
Yes, I mean, I kind of like the idea of you describing it as being fluid, but when it comes to fashion tech companies and the dreaded pandemic, which we've all experienced in the last 12 months, would you say that they've been taking a lot more seriously by the fashion industry, or would you say that the industry will most likely go back to business as usual as soon as we get the green light to say that all is well?
You want to start, Frederick? Go for it.
I can start. Yeah. I've noticed actually one difference that I've noticed lately. I've been doing this for quite a long time. I mean, putting together players and creating projects and trying to drive pilot projects and trying stuff. And what I noticed lately, I would say last 6 months, is that it's gone from being something interesting to something that you need to do, and you commit. So you do stuff. So it kind of, there is like a hill. We've gone over this little hill that we've gone from super interesting, tell us more, that could be interesting, to okay, let's do this. And so just from my perspective, I've seen that it's a couple of projects that we're doing now that is for real, that is these types of collaboration that I talked about that will happen. So and I think that's a big difference.
And also I think to add on that, it's the past year has been a huge accelerator. So I think, as Frederick said, it was already interesting and a lot of projects were already going on before the pandemic. But it's the same way that, for example, for e-commerce, as a way to sell our products, it's been, the pace has been really quickened, and we've had a huge jump, and I don't know the estimates, but it's probably 5 to 10 years in a year of development of e-commerce activities and digital in general. And I think that's true for all innovation and all fashion tech companies. And more importantly, I think, to go back to your question, it's here to stay. I think most companies have realized that it's also something that is sustainable on the business part, and a lot of those projects are going to go on and go on. And the new ways we find to communicate about creativity, about our products, are going to be new ways that are here to stay for a long period of time. That's my personal belief.
Welcome.
Yeah, I agree. I think this train just got started, and now is the time to jump on board. Otherwise, you're going to miss out. This is not going to reverse. And I think that's going to be even more accelerated as this, again, these trends tend to behave in exponential like trends. And so once the train got started, more and more innovation is going to be attracted to this space. And again, from other places, I mean, looking at Global Change Award, the most radical disruptive solutions we are seeing and receiving in Global Change Award are not even coming from within the fashion industry. So we're starting to attract a lot of innovation from outside that wants to be part of this sort of momentum. And so it's going to be really hard to reverse. And if you're not on board soon, you're going to completely miss out. And I think that's going to be one of the differentiators between players and brands and suppliers from today and 5 years ahead.
I think you've said that before, Frederick, about the what was it? The fridge? Was it the fridge and the ice maker? The solution came from a different industry.
Yeah, it was actually a Steve Jobs quote.
Oh, so it was your quote. I was impressed with it.
Yeah, but he used it to describe. He said that, back in the days, you had these companies that created ice, and they had, and they drove it out to people. That was before the refrigerator, and none of those were investing in R&D to invent the refrigerator. That came from the electricity company called General Electric. So. Often disruption in an industry comes from a completely different direction. He just took that as an example, but I think it's a good example of that. To jump the curve for those companies was not to make better ice block. It was to create something completely different, to really jump the curve. And I think that's a good example of, and that's what's happening, I think, in the fashion industry. This is not an iteration of what's today. There will be a jump. And when it happens, then it's like Eric's saying, it's no going back because it's already started.
No, I kind of liked that when you said that when we were having a conversation, and you kind of look at Bolt Threads. I mean, they are not a fashion company, but they are helping the fashion industry do better and be more sustainable. So a lot of the solutions that we are seeing with innovation, a lot of it is from people who say, well, I'm not in the fashion industry, but I've got a great idea for you guys that you can adopt. So it's quite nice to see that. Now let's talk about sustainability. For some people, this is a dirty word. For some people, it's a very exciting term. I do believe that a lot of technology is helping fashion brands be more sustainable, be less about Birkenstocks and beige clothing, and actually really change how they do business. And a lot of this knowledge is coming from fashion tech companies. Are there any particular startups that you guys have come across that are really pushing that sustainable message forward that you are impressed with and that you'd like to share with us today?
We have one, for example, and I think one really exciting field on sustainability is new materials, and how do we either improve existing materials or create entirely new ones. And for example, at the Innovation Award last year, we had one of the runner-ups was Deserto, which is an alternative to leather company, which is producing leather based on cactus. So not leather, but a fabric that is similar to leather based on cactus. And I think this is where these kind of solutions that can be industrialized, that really talk to the customers as well, but talk to the brands in the way that you can express your creativity is the same way that you do with existing fabrics and so on, I think is really important. And more when we look at the inbound startups for our programs, they are more and more focused on that. And how do we actually provide new kind of materials, whether it is based on natural resources or even lab-grown materials more and more. And you were mentioning startups like Bolt Thread. There are a bunch of others who work on the same kind of goal to be able to have lab-grown materials that are sustainable in the long term, but that are also industrializable. That you can industrialize as a company and therefore including your processes in your products. And I think that's a really exciting field, and it's really accelerated in the past few years. So the only barrier I would say is that it's really long-term R&D to be able to get there. Most of those companies have raised a lot of money, and it's a long process to actually get to a final product that, from my understanding, that can be industrialized.
Yeah, I agree with Archibald. It's so much happening. We have a ton of exciting startups that we meet every year through the Global Change Award. And the fun thing with working with them for a while is that they're not just promising, but they're starting to work with the industry, and we're now seeing the products on the shelves with different brands. And so leather alternatives there's a huge demand for that for obvious reasons. And Vegea, an Italian company making a leather substitute from grape marc, so the leftovers from wine production. So the more wine we drink and enjoy, the more marc is left over to make this alternative to leather. Mycotex is a Dutch-based, mycelium-based company, and we have some really forefront ones with our latest cohort, one from Brazil and the US named Gali. So they make lab-grown cotton, incredibly revolutionizing if we're able to do this in a controlled lab environment without relying on scarce freshwater assets, pesticides, and a very complex chain of logistics. So obviously a lot of potential in that. And Fabrics, startup based in Paris, so they convert CO2 from the air into polyester. So imagine a climate positive garment that actually is, if you wear it, then you know it's absorbed more CO2 than it emitted in production. And with our research partner HK Rita in Hong Kong, we have ourselves developed a fabric that absorbs CO2 during use. So over the use of that garment, it actually absorbs CO2 and it can have a positive impact. And on the more tech side of things, there are a bunch of companies, and one I'd like to mention is Unspun, based in San Francisco and Hong Kong. They're making these 3D on-demand jeans. So you 3D scan your body, you get them according to your measurements and style and preferences. And so that completely eliminates the need for inventory because you make them on demand. So it reduces a lot of business risk, obviously. And with the perfect fit, you also support and enable the customer to love the product for a longer time. And so you don't need as many jeans. And so that the more you love the product, the more you use it. And they've actually, coming back to collaboration, partnered with two other startups from Global Change Award, Eon, based in New York, and Resortex from Belgium, to make this jeans named the Genesis. So it's designed for recyclability. It's made with the 3D scan and customization tool from Unspun. It's sewn with the thread from Resortex, which melts at certain temperatures. So it enables separation. And that is a huge issue for recycling, to get rid of the buttons and zippers and stuff like that. And it's also tagged with a barcode from Eon, which has all the product information in the cloud. So either I, as a consumer, can engage and sort of learn more about my product, or the recycler in turn can scan that barcode, that QR code, and know what's in the product, so it can be recycled in the most optimal way. So I think that's an incredible, interesting product of how several innovations are coming together and startups are coming together to provide this solution, and not just sitting around and waiting for big industry to come along and play.
I love some of those companies that you mentioned. And you know what? The funny thing is, guys, so many questions are coming through right now. So if you don't mind, I want to get them answers. So let's start off with a few questions. And then if you have anything else you want to add, you can, if we have a bit more time, please feel free to kind of conclude. We've got a question from Karina Mola. I'm going to read it out here. She says, there are most fashion tech companies that make interesting developments, but they have problems in scaling up process or getting funds to go further with their project. What do you suggest for them as a kind of roadmap?
I mean, what helped us in the last few years, I can tell, was being part of different mentoring and generally programs. And I mean, we were part of the DeFINE mentoring program. That's how we ended up here as well. So it helped a lot to, on the one hand, have our very value-driven mission of changing or creating open source manufacturing tools. And we really struggled to find good business models for it, and to combine that with classical business mentoring. So people from the tech or for the fashion tech industry that supported us and like built bridges helped us a lot. So my advice would be definitely to take the chances and find mentors, find cooperation partners, find people to talk to from the classical business, and see how to build bridges for your idea into that very long existing system, and somewhere in between you'll find an answer for that.
Anyone else have anything to add?
I would say one thing that I think is quite important, especially for fashion tech companies. One of the problems with tech companies in general is that you can get caught in development for a very long time. And as a general rule, trying to get a product out as quickly as possible to try it out with the market, and especially in collaboration with the company. I mean, like Eric is talking about what H&M is doing. That's an accelerator, basically, where you can take something out to the market very quickly. And I think that is super important, because it's so easy, especially for tech companies, to get caught in years of development, and there is no end to that type of development.
And just to add quickly on that, I think also one point is maybe the way startups actually integrate within existing ecosystems. And I think that's a really good point that allows startups that do it well to scale up really quickly, is to be able to have, it's a trendy word, but the agility to be able to integrate yourself into existing ecosystems, because most of those companies already have structures in place that you need to be able as a startup to adapt yourself to as well. And I think it goes back to Frederick's points on being able to get to market as quickly as possible, and then to adapt to those changes that you're necessarily going to have to make to be able to integrate yourself into the existing ecosystem simply.
Yeah, and I think the ones we're asking money from are investors that count the dollars and cents every day, and so they base their behavior on very rational models. And whereas fashion is very much driven by this irrational sense of trends and seasons, and so it's a bit of a clash as well, I think, between the culture and the identity of fashion and the identity and culture of investors. So as a startup, my advice would also be to be very to the point and sharp on your business case, and really speak the language of an investor rather than being a very fashion company, because it's not always helpful if you want to convince someone to put money into you that they're sort of making a bet on a trend rather than a solution that's here to stick.
That's a really good point, Eric. I mean, I've spoken to quite a few startups and interviewed quite a few startups, and that's always been the problem, is convincing investors that it's a long-term commitment and they won't get a return in 6 months, or where's our money, 12 months. You know, they want it. You need to kind of make sure you communicate that correctly and say, listen, this is a long-term commitment and this is what you'll get from each year, and so forth. So yeah, because when I was writing for various magazines, I actually always spoke to startups, and they always said, but they don't understand that this takes time, you know. And I feel like it's, while you're not speaking their language, as Eric said, speak their language, and then they'll probably will get it, and then they'll probably understand, and then know what they're going to get out of committing to your idea. Back to the questions, guys. There's someone called Marie Busten. Hopefully I said that right, Marie. She asks, should fashion tech always be driving sustainability? How do you see this evolving?
Yeah, I can go first on that. I think, yeah, I mean, you can't really do anything in this industry, believe in the future and not do it with sustainability in mind, or at least understand how you plug into the trend of sustainability and the expectations around sustainability from both consumers, institutional investors and owners of existing companies, the VC investors that want impact as well. And so, yeah, you can't isolate yourself from sustainability if you're in the fashion industry. That said, not everyone is directly hooked up to sustainability, but rather an enabler, like a technology that enables others to behave more sustainably. But yeah, you got to plug into that in some way, and it's got to be clear.
I mean, I truly believe that as young generation coming up, to which I also partly belong, where where I believe the question is put wrongly. It's not, should fashion tech always be driving sustainability? The thing is, sustainability is driving everything we do, because we are in a crisis. And I think this needs to be also, in terms of fashion industry, put as the ground from which we continue to work on. And that being said, I mean, it's also when we talk about innovation and new startups in terms of fashion industry that we like we talked a bit before. What I always kind of lack is the question on how to systemically also change textile industry. It's not only about new materials or lab-grown materials. It's definitely about on-demand and customized new products. But I mean, I think it's a bigger question there, how to implement sustainability as the ground, as the starting point on how we work and collaborate. And I think saying that sustainability is an add-on is the wrong approach to do business. We need to rethink that. And rethinking means also rethinking our workflows, rethinking manufacturing locations, rethinking how we also invest in companies with sustainability or companies that are value-driven, where it's not even a question that they're sustainable because everything is built up from ground. So there is not too much negative impact while producing. So I think there's a huge shift that we need to discuss and address, which we lack to do most of the time.
And maybe just to add something in Natalia's words, the good news, as Frederick said before, we have this Green Deal. So we have this movement coming from the customers, so they want to consume better products and better fashion. And it's also this impact and laws coming from the top. So it's something that we have to do, and it's very good. And I'm really positive about this change.
Someone else asked, thank you, Sarah. Someone else asks, do you think fashion businesses will care more about innovation than Fashion Week going forward?
I think it will be more important to think about innovation than Fashion Weeks going forward. Definitely. I don't think that's any fashion company will take that choice, but I think that definitely innovation will be so important. I mean, look at what Eric said and what Archibald said, and it's a driver for the business going forward, and there's no turning back. So of course, innovation will be an important part of going forward.
I don't think innovation is a choice anymore. I think the companies that thought innovation was a choice are no longer with us. You know, no names will be mentioned today, but we all know the companies I'm referring to. You know, it's not, innovation is not it's no longer an afterthought. You know, these are things that are necessary in order to go forward as a business, and that's why it's super important to educate oneself and to understand what's going on. You know, if you look at all the other fields like the medical field and so forth, they're always constantly learning and educating themselves. But the fashion industry, they had their degree 20 years ago, and you're still referring to that degree you had 20 years ago. Yet the industry itself has changed. So he needs to constantly learn to educate themselves. And I think that's what the problem is. We need to always be open to seeing what's new, who's doing what, you know, why should we change? How can we change? Who can I work with? And constantly do that. So it's not about making that choice, like the question asked, you know, innovation or Fashion Week. It's just, you know, we need to change, and that's it. And if it's through innovation, then so be it. You know, so I kind of feel really passionate about that, because I always feel like we're lacking in education. We like to talk, but we never like to do. So, you know, but we do have another question that's.
I might just add to that, Muchaneta, that you're perfectly right, and you're hitting a really important spot that I think this industry also had such an incredible success in the last 20, 30 years, that it doesn't really understand that it needs to change. I think that's holding also back, that we've done so well, why change this winning concept? But back to Frederick's point about the ice and the refrigerator. No, not a single one of the successful ice companies survived that transformation and disruption. None of them made it into the refrigerating business, and so that's what's going to happen if you're not, if you're not in innovation.
I agree completely with that. I mean, I do feel like, you know, people are still trying to figure out whether they should, you know, invest or whether it's something short term. I don't think there's much belief right now in the merge of fashion with technology. I think the industry is still hesitant. And rightly so. Like you said, they've been doing so well for the last 30 years. Why change it? you know, and I feel the pandemic has shown them why they need to change it, because if they don't, they're going to literally be stuck. And we're going to talk about them in the past tense rather than the present, because it was something that we remember from 5 years ago, 10 years ago. But we have one final question, guys, before we wrap up. Someone says, I like the idea of collaborating, but I feel it is something only available to established fashion businesses. How can I, as a startup, find companies that I can collaborate with?
Well, I think with just a quick word, I think there is more and more hubs of startups and of different companies that you can be a part of and that facilitate conversations with each other. And I think that's whether it is for corporate programs, whether it is for foundation, whether it is state programs. We have a lot in the big cities, you said, but in all cities around the world, specifically if you're around innovation topics, you have more and more funds and more programs that allow you to actually talk to each other. And I think that's really important. That's where you're going to get, we see it every day in the startups we support. They talk to each other a lot and they improve their products based on those conversations on a daily basis. And I think that's extremely important to have the feedback other founders will be able to provide and to be able to adapt your product and to have the agility to adapt your product regarding those feedbacks. So yeah, I would say programs and conversations and events, even though they are digital right now, as it's maybe a bit less easy to meet people and to communicate, but still we have a lot of events that allow you to do that. And as soon as things open up physically again, I think being able to attend events is also important because it allows you to meet a lot of people.
And maybe to add something there as a startup, we have a lot of, it's really important to have like an exchange, collaborate, and especially to have like a, interdisciplinary collaboration. So I don't think that within the fashion, we're going to find the solution for fashion. I think this like playing with different disciplines, we're going to find the solution. And we have a lot of collaboration with fashion researchers such as Holly McQuillan based on Bordeaux, or in Holland also. And this is very important. And I remark what you said before. It's very important to attend to events, exhibitions, fairs, and then you meet a lot of great people and you start to connecting and networking. And this is the base to have the chance to know other people interested in projects and to have these collaborations, and also great European programs that support startups.
Yeah, I would add to that as well. I would say that, one thing that I would say to the companies is look outside the fashion business as well. You don't have to focus directly on the fashion companies, because there are players out there that want to go into fashion and that comes from completely, like gaming, for instance. And some of the gaming companies have a lot of knowledge about fashion, more knowledge than some of the fashion companies that I talk to. So they're really aware about their area. And so I would say look outside as well. From the traditional fashion industry as a startup, especially if you come with a new innovation, because there might be players out there that are super interested in entering the market from a different perspective.
Good advice for sure. We are now coming to the end, guys. And if you are a startup and you're listening to us, please feel free to join the speed networking that we're doing here on the platform, which gives you the opportunity to engage with those who are attending and also kind of make those valuable appointments to have a conversation and to figure out whether you can meet someone who can help you with your business. Also up next is the Startup Boot Camp Fashion Tech, which will be available at booth 13. DeFINE will be presenting an interactive map at their booth as well. And Fashion Technology Accelerator will also be available to connect with them. At 1:30, we are doing the speed networking, which I just mentioned earlier. And then we return to the main stage at 2 o'clock for the panel that will be exploring the fashion tech ecosystem. I want to say a big, big thank you to Archibald, to Eric, to Sarah, to Natasha, and also to Frederick for joining us today. I hope you guys got a lot of information out of the conversation. And if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to connect with our speakers. I'm sure they'll be more than happy to give you any further information and to just have that conversation that kind of kickstarts the whole fashion tech.